There's a fundamental principle in crisis management. When warning signals are sent too many times without corresponding evidence, the system automatically switches to ignoring mode. Recently, royal observers have noticed a cryptic message believed to have originated from the Balmoral estate. Without explicitly naming anyone, the sharp words seem to allude to a classic fable, the story of the signal spoofer. An unverified source suggests that Princess Anne's reaction was not simply the disappointment of an aunt, but rather the rejection of an institution. When reconciliation efforts are likened to the shepherd boy's cry for help, it raises a frightening hypothesis. Has the Windsor royal family officially activated a permanent disconnection protocol? If this hypothesis is correct, then the Duke of Sussex's return to London earlier this month, despite the confidence gained from legal victories against media corporations, was perhaps just an attempt to knock on a sealed wall. Let's look at the royal family's travel schedule through the lens of a geopolitical chess game. The data shows that just before our protagonist arrived in London hoping to establish a direct channel of dialogue, a coincidence occurred. The Prince and Princess of Wales made a trip to Scotland. The media called it a long-term commitment, but from a behavioral analysis perspective, many experts questioned it. Could this be a tactic of creating physical distance to avoid diplomatic conflict? If they had stayed just 24 hours, a historic meeting might have taken place. But history has no ifs. This mismatch in space and time seems to be a silent message. The door to diplomacy has closed. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a different scenario is unfolding in Silicon Valley. The Duchess's absence from court proceedings in England is not merely a logistical issue, but appears to be a deliberate move. Brand repositioning, images of her appearing in Palo Alto, dressed in a white suit, and without her wedding ring triggered a series of semiotic theories. The absence of the ring, could it be a message of independence? And more notably, this event was believed to be linked to a venture capital fund with the ticker symbol MS, a mysterious financial variable from the Middle East. Strategic analysts believe this is not merely an expansion of relationships, it may be a preparatory step toward a separation of public image. A former aide once remarked cryptically, "These are positioning moves." And those on the inside certainly understand the rules of this game. Let's conduct a thought experiment. What if history had taken a different turn in 2016? Archived records point to the name Lady Arabella Montlair, a figure insiders once described as the perfect missing piece for the traditional royal framework. They shared the same educational background and conservative values. But at that time, the allure of freedom and unconventionality from the American factor prevailed. The system had once hoped for a safe combination, but individual choices disrupted that pattern. Now, in retrospect, the contrast between reality and that parallel universe creates a paradoxical picture. On one side, stability within a framework. On the other, freedom, but at the cost of isolation. From a symbol of liberation, the Duke of Sussex's journey seems to be facing an existential crisis. Popular culture critics have noted a shift in his status. From the protagonist of his own life story, he appears to be gradually becoming a satellite, revolving around larger media projects. Quiet appearances, supporting roles on the red carpet, all paint a picture of a man searching for his true self. The dazzling California dream seems to be transforming into a more complex structure, where the stone walls of the old castle have vanished, replaced by the invisible glass walls of media pressure and performance. The ultimate question we as observers must ask is, Does absolute freedom truly exist, or are we simply moving from one cage to another, more glamorous one? Time is a cruel sculptor. On the face of the man, once a symbol of military courage and royal dynamism, now stand the marks of a persistent inner struggle. Behavioral observers believe that the Duke of Sussex is experiencing a psychological phenomenon called identity displacement. From being a force for change, he seems to be gradually realizing that he is merely a supporting element in a brand strategy over which he no longer has control. The turning point in this breakdown didn't begin with noisy legal disputes, but rather stemmed from a more private space, a gap in generational responsibility. As the youngest members of the family enter a critical stage of cognitive development, a serious disconnect in family governance perspectives emerges. Sources close to the Montecito ecosystem reveal that Harry has expressed deep concern about his partner's frequent absences. While he desires a physical presence to provide psychological stability for the next generation, his partner is devoting all his energy to re-establishing his global standing as a thought leader in justice. Harry's suggestions to adjust his schedule reportedly met with resistance. In a philosophical debate, his traditional views were labeled outdated and patriarchal. This was the first crack in the foundations of the alliance. But the peak of suspicion didn't come from words, but from tangible objects. A theory is circulating widely among insiders about the appearance of these untransparent funding sources' luxury items, from diamond-studded jewelry to works of art, began appearing at the residence without any clear transaction records. When questioned, the answers often revolved around concepts like PR strategy or brand partnerships. But the intuition of someone who had lived in a high-security environment like Harry's began to sound the alarm. Open Intelligence OSINT began to connect the dots. Speculation centers around a powerful figure in aristocratic sports circles, a shadow investor known for funding media projects and collecting global icons. While no joint images have been released, the timelines of the charity meetings and the secret project, 90419, coincide eerily with the Duchess's absence. Consider the timeline. Just 20 hours after such a secret meeting, Harry appears alone in Santa Barbara. His red eyes and exhaustion are not merely physical signs, but symptoms of complete isolation. When Harry attempted to re-establish the boundary setting, the reaction he received was described as a devastating psychological attack. An anonymous source described him as being likened to the weak remnants of an old golden cage, a bitter irony comparing him to the very system he had abandoned to fight against. At that moment, Harry realized his true position. He was not a companion, but an asset losing its usefulness. It was no longer a marriage in the traditional sense. It was a business merger that had reached a dead end. Let's pause the document analysis for a moment and hear from you, the channel's observers. Based on the recent psychological developments, how do you assess Harry during this phase? Comment number 2 if you feel sorry for him, a lost soldier manipulated and lonely paying the price for his mistakes. Comment number 5 if you feel no sympathy at all and believe this is the deserved outcome of what he has done to his family. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the shocking legal developments ahead. Harry felt like a minority shareholder in the very company he had invested in. And as an inevitable consequence of this irreconcilable conflict of interest in August 2025, a final decision was made. In a chilling silence, the legal documents for terminating the alliance were drafted. The reason given was not just a difference of sentiment, but a complete breakdown of moral compass. In any high-level negotiation, whichever side holds the other's emotional vulnerability will prevail. This is the fundamental principle of asymmetric information warfare. Just as legal proceedings were being initiated, an unexpected variable appeared on Harry's personal communication device. Not a legal document, but a highly damaging image. A medical moment involving the next generation, little Lilibet. Analysts believe this was no simple family announcement. In that sensitive context, it became a strategic leverage. As a result, the very next morning, case number 2025-DR-3381 in Santa Barbara was closed and permanently sealed within 72 hours. Harry chose his children's safety over victory at the negotiating table. A painful tactical retreat. The reconciliation period, which lasted from September to November in San Luis Obispo, revealed a harsh truth: the bankruptcy of faith. But even more frightening than the disagreements themselves is the way the conflict is handled. Leaked recordings reveal a complex psychological pattern: reality distortion. When Harry expressed legitimate concerns about security or integrity, the response he received was not empathy, but a sophisticated reframing technique. His anxieties were labeled as remnants of outdated thinking, as fantasy. The image of the Windsor ruins. In other words, his pain is denied and attributed to a systemic failure in his own thinking. This is the pinnacle of narrative control when the victim begins to doubt his own sanity. Parallel to the internal crisis is the collapse of the external economic front. By the end of 2025, the Montecito ecosystem begins to face the harsh laws of market elimination. Media giants like Netflix and Spotify, who had bet millions of dollars on the brand, have begun implementing loss-cutting measures. The reason given is chillingly simple: lack of depth and real-world resonance. The market no longer pays for a good reputation. More seriously, the Archewell Foundation, once hailed as a beacon of ethics, is reportedly under the scrutiny of auditing agencies. Resource allocation efficiency. Questions about inconsistencies in financial reporting are a sign that the top echelons of this empire are shaking. Amidst that chaos, a moment of truth has inadvertently leaked out. A seemingly harmless statement on a podcast, yet it carries the weight of a subconscious confession. Sometimes the person you give the world to believes they are your creator. Initially, the public thought it was a jab at the royal family. But now, in the current context, it's the sigh of a man realizing he's been stripped of his authorship over his own life. And then what had to happen happened. January 23, 2026. No loud press release, no blockbuster interview. There was only one cold, decisive legal action. Prince Harry officially announced he was relinquishing his California residency. It wasn't just a move, it was a unilateral declaration of independence. He declared his separation from all institutional frameworks in the United States to start anew as an independent individual. The American dream was over, but Harry's journey of self-discovery had perhaps only just begun. The consequences of this event are not measured by political indicators, but by the collapse of symbols. Before any official announcement was made, financial censors had detected unusual tremors from the Sussex estate. This wasn't simply a matter of cutting expenses, but a process. Total deconstruction. 3 senior executives at Montecito have received notices of termination. A luxury Range Rover, a symbol of power mobility, has been quietly returned to Jaguar UK without any request for replacement. This move has been described by analysts as a stripping of ranks in civilian life. More notably, financial records show that a complex debt negotiation is underway with representatives of a Beverly Hills media mogul, someone who once provided them with a protective shield back in 2020. Harry isn't just repaying financial debts, he's settling every debt of gratitude cleanly and completely to sever the last remaining ties to Hollywood's elite. A source close to the situation observed, "This isn't downsizing. This is the act of a man tearing down a false castle to rediscover his true foundation." By the end of the week, news satellites confirmed Harry had established a new base, a secluded rented apartment in Hampshire. No more heavy security, no PR entourage, no flashing cameras. The contrast between glamorous Santa Barbara and tranquil Hampshire mirrored the contrast in his state of mind. At his old residence, a handwritten note was found, a declaration of his rebirth. "I lost myself in the noise, but I found a reason to start over in solitude." That is the state demilitarization of individuals. He shed all his defenses to confront himself. While Buckingham Palace maintained a strategic silence, Princess Anne, considered the steel pillar of the royal family, stepped to the front lines. At a riding center in Perth, her response was not tinged with personal emotion, but carried the weight of a history lesson. She recalled the metaphorical image of the boy who cried wolf. Without naming names, the message was about inflation of trust. It has been clearly sent, when the wolf actually arrived, the alarm system was neutralized by the very lies that had preceded it. However, political observers point out an interesting contradiction in her tactics. Despite publicly issuing warnings, intelligence sources confirm that Anne secretly activated legal advisors to establish a safety net. She was the only one who believed in Harry's ability to reform, but that belief came with strict preconditions. But all the royal calculations, all media predictions, were overturned by an unexpected move. Princess Anne's fragile faith seemed to have reached its limit in Geneva. On the night of January 22nd, Harry unexpectedly appeared at a forum on media ethics and the misuse of cross-border information. He wasn't there to apologize. He was there as a living witness, someone holding the most sensitive data on how the media machine operates. This appearance wasn't a white flag of surrender, but a signal that Harry was ready for a new battle where he was no longer the victim, but the holder of the truth. The story of the shepherd boy has ended. Now it's the story of the hunter searching for his lost flock of sheep. The scene in Geneva didn't resemble an entertaining press conference, but rather a hearing. There was no PR machine, no script prepared by Hollywood experts. The man who stepped onto the podium dressed minimally performed an action that analysts called a reclaiming personal sovereignty. The handwritten note in his hand contained no excuses. It contained an admission of system failure. I was wrong about the input parameters, and I was being manipulated by algorithms that weren't my own. That 3-minute video created a digital earthquake. But the real aftershock wasn't the apology, but the accompanying data. Immediately after the announcement, an anonymous source whistleblower detonated a bombshell. Leaked documents hinted at the existence of an unspoken protocol. It was signed at the end of 2024. The hypothesis is that while one side is trying to protect its privacy, the other, the strategic partner, appears to have signed an agreement transferring access to internal royal data to a New York-based media corporation. This is not just a matter of trust. In intelligence terms, this is misconduct. Information arbitrage, where national and family secrets are converted into commercial assets without the consent of the parties involved. The severity escalates when the attached files are decrypted. These are believed to contain audio data recording high-level interactions between 2020 and 2022. If the authenticity of this data is verified, it would mean that the royal family's information security has been breached from within. Storing private conversations without consent is considered a serious offense. Unorthodox surveillance. Faced with this accusation, Buckingham Palace activated a strategic silence mode, neither denying nor confirming. Because in the world of diplomacy, silence in the face of a serious violation is often a sign of a potential threat. The red line. It has been surpassed permanently. The monarchy, like a living organism, is reacting to protect itself. The late Queen might have called this a cold cut, not because love had run dry, but because institutional preservation protocol. The top priority has been given. A dramatic shift in power is underway. Charles is relinquishing his responsibilities, and William and Catherine are taking over the royal estate. This move is reinforcing the firewall around the throne. The message is clear: the door to reconciliation has closed to protect the remaining structure of the castle. Back in Hampshire, where the roars of the California canyons and the grandeur of Windsor were long gone, the man who had once been a prince, a duke in exile, paced back and forth in his quiet rented house. All titles, all honors, all illusions of global influence had been stripped away. He had returned. 0 point. But in that absolute silence, when the noise of ambition faded away, he realized his only remaining and most important role, not as a symbol, not as a media commodity, simply as a father finding his way home. And perhaps that was the real beginning. Now the former prince faces a fateful decision, the most brutal zero-sum game of his life. Sources close to him describe his mind as a battlefield where an endless battle rages between responsibility for protection and the ego's need for survival. For him, every hour that passed in Hampshire was an invisible punishment. The absence of Archie, 6 years old, and Lilibet, 3 years old, was not just a source of longing, but a disruption of the generational flow. But the paradox lies in this: returning to the war zone, to be near his child, means accepting the gradual erosion of his own self. He is trapped in a dilemma. Staying means fading into historical oblivion, while leaving means facing the risk of being typecast as a villain who abandons his family. The end of 2025 saw the activation of mandatory reconciliation protocols in California. The initial goal was to establish a transcontinental parenting model, where the next generation would inherit the elite British education alongside the freedoms of America. However, this proposal encountered a solid ideological wall. The opposing side completely rejected it, labeling the British education system as a regression to imperialism and considering it a systemic vulnerability. The result of negotiations spanning 2 closed-door sessions was an asymmetrical ceasefire agreement. Harry theoretically accepted joint custody, but in reality he was bound by a geographical veto power. The succeeding generation is locked within U.S. territory and cannot move without the signature of approval from the remaining guardian, an overwhelming victory in terms of territorial control. While one side was paralyzed by legal hurdles, the other made a calculated strategic move on the new geopolitical chessboard, the Middle East. On January 19th, the cameras captured the Duchess's appearance in Abu Dhabi, the new center of power for the super-rich. It was no coincidence that this event took place just 4 days before the Geneva Accords. This was a display of precise brand management. Dressed in an elegant black abaya, the highlight wasn't the words, but the sign language of the expensive Cartier brooch, an item rumored by insiders to symbolize a new funding stream from the Gulf region. Analysts call this jewelry diplomacy. Standing before an audience of financial architects and global technology philanthropists, the message delivered went far beyond the confines of traditional feminism. The theme of women reclaiming autonomy without permission is essentially a blueprint, declaration of independence encrypted. She wasn't just speaking about women in general. She was publicly repositioning herself an independent entity, having broken free from the orbit of the British monarchy and forging a new alliance with global resources. One attendee remarked cryptically, "She's very charismatic." But clearly she's not just giving a speech. She's soliciting investment for a new empire where she'll have absolute power. Beneath the polished rhetoric of the speech, behavioral analysts have uncovered a dramatic shift in thinking. The excerpt circulating on social media is not simply a philosophy of life, but the manifesto on absolute egoism. The quote, "Sometimes love means leaving and becoming your own ruler." It is seen as the final verdict on old contracts. Many observers believe this is a unilateral announcement ending not only her role as marital partner, but also a rejection of traditional definitions of family responsibilities and royal duties. She is shedding her old identities to build an empire where there is only one ruler. But every empire needs resources to operate. Even as global imagery is being reshaped, shadow data continues to follow. The focus is on a powerful figure from the Gulf, hailed as the new financial architect for the distinct Sussex brand. Economic intelligence reports confirm this individual's presence in Abu Dhabi alongside 2 senior executives from House Aru, a luxury goods group from Paris. The theory that a royal inspiration fragrance line is launching this spring isn't just business. It's a strategic move, commercializing old glory to cultivate new power. Meghan appears to be undertaking a visual technology transfer, draining Windsor's iconic value to inject it into her personal brand. January 20th. 3 days before the Geneva event, a final digital signal was sent. Not an online negotiation, just a 37-second audio codec. Its content is considered a perfect psychological tactic. The best way to love someone is to let them become someone else. That wasn't a comforting remark. It was a disconnection protocol. It rationalized the betrayal in the language of nobility. Sources close to the matter say Harry analyzed the message all night, not in search of hope, but to accept that the entity he once loved had not. It still exists. In that context, Princess Anne established a safe buffer zone. She was the sole provider of logistical support, but it came with a drawback. Firewall strict. Locations like rural Gloucester or Western Lodge were suggested as places to meet the children, but her message was as cold as steel. We are defending family honor, not personal regrets. This isn't forgiveness. This is risk management. Anne is drawing a clear line. Royal support ends where the consequences of Harry's personal actions begin. And finally, the big picture is complete with a tragic contrast. January 19th. Meghan shines in Abu Dhabi in the aura of feigned autonomy and renewal. January 23rd. Harry stands alone in Geneva in the stark reality. No bodyguards, no fanfare. At that quiet moral forum, the boy who had once dreamed of escaping the golden cage realized a cruel paradox. He had never truly been free. He had merely moved from one jailer to another, more sophisticated one. On the podium, Harry detonated the final truth bomb, tearing apart all illusions. I was manipulated. I was exploited as a financial asset, not just by the world, but by the very architect of my new life, whom I once trusted completely. With those words, the curtain fell. The drama, which had lasted nearly a decade, was over. And now, amidst the ashes of illusions, a truly real person is beginning to take their first steps. In Geneva, the truth didn't just come from words, but from encrypted data packets. Prince Harry revealed that the clue to his awakening stemmed from an anonymous email sent via the secure Proton Mail protocol. Inside was the blueprint of a business deal he never signed. Leaked documents revealed the existence of an intellectual property licensing agreement signed in October 2024 with Fremont Media, a California-based company specializing in restructuring crises into culture. Analysts have dubbed the content of this agreement as follows: the transfer of memory assets, handwritten letters, personal diaries, and the most intimate psychological analyses of the royal family. All were packaged into a commercial product catalog, books, film adaptations, and courses branded as healing. What shocked Harry wasn't the financial figures, but the absence of his own name in the co-owner section. This was proof that in this alliance he wasn't a partner, he was production materials. But the seriousness of the Fremont case didn't stop there. Attached to the email were audio files, evidence of an internal monitoring system. Operated right at the Sussex estate since 2020, these tapes record everyday conversations. But from an analytical perspective, they resemble intelligence gathering, intel gathering. One excerpt mentions Princess Kate. Her silence was the strongest slap in the face. This is the weaponization of nonverbal behavior. Another passage describes King Charles. He doesn't understand. The company doesn't protect you, it modifies you. A deconstructive portrayal of the leader. Even more terrifying was the sound of Harry's own voice. A tired, passive voice. Maybe we should stop talking like this when the kids are home. That wasn't the voice of an accomplice, but the voice of experimental subjects exhausted in his own home. If this data is true, it completely contradicts all claims of privacy. After all, you can't demand privacy when you're turning your living room into a secret recording studio. Immediately after the Geneva earthquake, all cameras were focused on Kensington Palace awaiting a blow or a tear, but they received only absolute silence. Prince William and Princess Catherine activated a psychological tactic called Grey Rock, becoming numb, unresponsive, and bored in the face of any provocation. During his visit to Manchester Children's Hospital, William appeared the composure of an heir to the throne. Catherine was radiant, completely focused on her official duties. Not a blink of an eye in response to the questions shouted from the crowd of reporters. However, behind the iron gates, security sources confirmed a permanent change in status. A senior aide revealed the Geneva speech marked the end. To Prince William, Harry is no longer his younger brother, but an entity that has been taken, irreparably compromised. In the mind of the future head of the royal family, Harry had become a living security vulnerability. No more bridges, no more diplomatic meetings. Catherine reportedly described these revelations as a predictable scenario, but her response was a call for maximum restraint. They understood that in this information war, the first person to speak up and explain is the loser. And so while Harry was alone, exposing the truth in Switzerland and England, the final wall had officially closed. He was free from the deception, but at the cost of absolute isolation from his own past. In Hampshire, there were no more sirens, no more flashing lights. Only silence remained. Harry didn't face royal punishment. He faced something far more terrifying, the consequences of complicity. For years, he used his reputation to defend a flawed script. Now that the curtain has fallen, he realizes he wasn't a victim. He was the architect of his own prison. On the morning of January 24th, Princess Anne sent a cool but decisive message putting an end to all speculation. The royal family is not a shelter from the storm. When you choose to leave, the gates are locked from the inside. That's not cruelty. That's system preservation protocol. Harry remains a beloved grandson in memory, but a security risk in reality. Meanwhile, across the ocean, a new empire is rising. Meghan launches her platform, Ark Legacy. The name Harry is no longer used. No longer holding a royal title, she took the final step in her brand management strategy, total decoupling. She strode forward like a queen in her own right. Harry remained behind, with a letter to King Charles never sent lying cold in his trunk. The letter contained only a belated realization. Duty, it turns out, is the highest form of freedom. The story doesn't end with a peace treaty. It ends with a paradox. The one who wanted to escape the gilded cage now longs to return. The one who wanted to change the world now only wishes to rediscover himself. The silence of Buckingham Palace today is not the end. It is the beginning of a new era, where old names will gradually fade from the annals. Will Harry fade into oblivion as a shadow on the fringes of history? Or is this a step backward to prepare for another earth-shattering counterattack? The answer is still being written. This information is for reference only based on unverified hypotheses and rumors/public opinions. Let's discuss this issue from an objective analytical perspective. Now it's time for you to make your mark in this information war type 1. If you believe this scenario is actually unfolding in the shadows, type 0. If you choose to retain the skeptical attitude of a discerning observer, don't just watch, think. Press like to confirm presence and subscribe the channel immediately. As this velvet curtain falls, another veil of secrecy is about. Recently, a hypothesis has given many people pause. Why have priceless treasures like Queen Victoria's brooch or Princess Diana's pearl necklace suddenly vanished, leaving only vague notes behind? Some unverified sources even suggest this could be the sign of a cross-border underground network where absolute trust in supreme authority becomes a fatal flaw. Comment 1 if you believe this is a battle to protect heritage. Comment 0 if you think the secret runs even deeper. Like and subscribe now to join us in decoding the architecture of power and the buried truths. Beneath the gilded domes where time seems to stand still due to the impenetrable security of the British palaces, lie treasures measured not just in carats, but in millennia of history. They are symbols of an immutable system of power. However, a shocking theory is emerging. Can a fortress of faith be breached from within? When routine inventory checks, which were once merely procedural, turn into tense reconciliation sessions, an invisible truth begins to emerge. Everything began like a cold draft slipping through the corridors of Kensington Palace. Iconic objects, the jade brooch of Queen Victoria, the legendary pearl necklace once gifted by a Middle Eastern king to the late Princess Diana, now existed only as vague notes in archival records. When artifacts that were meant to appear at national events suddenly remained absent for years, the explanations of restoration or on loan began to reveal troubling gaps in logic. Amid the erosion of traditional values, Prince William took an unprecedented step. Bypassing official channels, he turned to Simon Harcourt, a specialist in identifying security vulnerabilities, a quiet operator who dealt exclusively with the cracks beneath the surface of high society. In a discreet room where daylight was smothered by heavy curtains, an investigation grounded in historical data analysis began. The notebook revealed more than missing items. It exposed a systemic collapse. Harcourt scrutinized decades of records, tracing the faintest clues on clasps and cuts. In a system of absolute control, is this a simple error or a dark internal shift? It begs the question, is heritage eternal, or can everything simply be replaced? Simon Harcourt's investigation no longer stopped at hypotheses on paper. He understood that in the world of national treasures, every gemstone carries its own distinct genetic code, its cut, its clarity, even the way it is mounted into its metal setting, and at a discreet auction in Paris accessible only to encrypted entities, a diamond necklace surfaced that through it was the ultimate silent witness, a custom clasp matching 1970s records perfectly. This shattered the palace's facade, yet the true horror wasn't the value but the systemic method behind it. Harcourt uncovered a sophisticated legal camouflage, where royal treasures were deliberately masked with vague labels like European provenance or 19th century relics. A cross-border network emerged, traces stretching from Geneva and Antwerp to Dubai, perfect buffer zones for the movement of high-value assets, and a strange commonality appeared as well. Despite passing through multiple auction houses, every trail led back to the same legal representative and a single luxury logistics firm, making it clear this was not an isolated theft, but a deliberate historical purge orchestrated by an entity with both access to the royal vaults and the authority to approve transfers without triggering any alarm systems. As the list of displaced fragments grew longer, Prince William faced a harsh reality. What was being lost was not jewelry, but entire chapters of a nation. Harcourt identified a fatal flaw in the security system: absolute trust in supreme authority. When a signature from the highest level appeared on documents authorizing the removal of artifacts for restoration or diplomatic exhibition, every layer of security automatically stood down, and the pursuit shifted from objects to people. In a dimly lit cafe in Antwerp, a veteran gemstone appraiser revealed a crucial detail. 2 years earlier, he had been asked to evaluate stones of regal beauty for an anonymous client. The intermediary was a figure with impeccably British mannerisms, yet who spoke French with effortless fluency during confidential calls, and the stones the expert identified were precisely the missing pieces from the palace collection. See, the trail was no longer made up of lifeless numbers. It had begun to take the shape of a specific individual. Within a power structure built on some of the strictest rules in the world, what is truly more frightening, the enemy from outside or the betrayal embedded within the very procedures designed to safeguard trust? When the symbols of the past are quietly sold off, does the true value of the crown lie in its diamonds or in a loyalty that has begun to fracture? In the world of heritage artifacts, human memory may fade, but expert appraisers do not. In a quiet, secluded corner, a former gemstone specialist who had spent his entire life reading the character of crystals provided a piece of destiny. 3 of the missing stones from the list were accurately identified by him through photographs. The trail lay not only in the material but also in the behavioral portrait of the transporter. He spoke impeccable English, yet transacted in French, a sophisticated operator. He wasn't a thief, he was a logistics architect. Suspicion soon fell on Charles Everly. As a former senior aide, Everly held the master keys. He knew every artifact's history and the palace's secret security protocols. Everly's departure into the shadows 3 years earlier and his re-emergence as a private heritage consultant created a strikingly alarming correlation. During a calculated meeting at an exclusive London club, where privacy was the ultimate principle, Harcourt witnessed the moment of a cracked facade. With just a subtle mention of the legendary sapphire ring, Everly's calm gaze shifted into a cold, calculating precision. It was the reflex of someone holding a secret the entire world was seeking. The investigative analysis entered a critical phase as Harcourt cross-referenced 3 independent streams of data movement schedules, auction logs, and vault access records. The data revealed that Everly was not acting alone. On trips to gray financial hubs like Geneva and Monaco, he was frequently accompanied by a figure enjoying diplomatic immunity, a privilege allowing luggage and shipments to pass through any border unchecked. As the layers of fog were peeled back, the system pointed to a single convergence, an entity with the authority to sign decrees, the influence to conceal vulnerabilities, and the proximity to render all suspicion inconceivable. That entity was Queen Camilla. This hypothesis raises a staggering question. Could a core member of the royal family be involved in the self-dismantling of their own dynasty's treasures? How do you assess Queen Camilla's role in this enigmatic architecture? Type 2, if you are impressed by her quiet power, or 5, if you believe in the eternal preservation of the monarchy. Like and subscribe now to not miss the moment we unravel the final links in this dramatic journey of power. With unrestricted access and the ability to legitimize jewelry shipments for diplomatic purposes, Camilla possessed a unique position to operate a system of asset transfers that no one dared question. For Prince William, this was no longer a simple security investigation. This was a crisis of integrity of the crown. When a security system is built on absolute trust, isn't the greatest risk that this trust might be used as a tool for personal gain? If this evidence is true, is this a single act of self-interest or a sign of a deep rift in the power structure we have come to trust? Will you choose to protect tradition or expose the truth, even if that truth might bring down an entire monument? Every systemic investigation reaches a critical point where the data is no longer just lifeless numbers, but becomes a living entity. The indictment of history. Over the course of 2 weeks, Harcourt conducted a multi-tiered verification process. Witnesses at European auction houses posing as appraisal experts revealed a crucial detail. A woman with an air of utmost nobility was directly involved in the process. Revaluation, royal relics. The act of removing gloves to open the velvet box containing the Victorian jade brooch was not merely a noble gesture, it was the moment the truth was revealed under the lights of the private appraisal rooms. When the leather-bound file was placed on Prince William's desk, the space seemed compressed by the weight of systemic betrayal. The chosen location was the Blue Room at Buckingham Palace, a space symbolic of silence and eternal secrets. Here, Queen Camilla's composure confronted the cold resolve of the future monarch. As the file was pushed across the desk, a scenario unfolded of heritage erosion. It has been exposed. Camilla didn't deny the meetings, cloaking them in diplomatic protocols and secure restoration. But when pressed for records, silence followed. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a war between sacred tradition and cold pragmatism. Though she offered no confession, the balance of power had shifted forever. Camilla exited with a stoic face, yet her silence confirmed an irreparable rift. Immediately, a shadow shift swept through the palace. Sudden absences and nervous aids signaled the start of power isolation. The system was rapidly closing ranks to shield its core from the inevitable media storm. Prince William faces a choice that could be life or death for the monarchy. Revealing the truth could shatter an image built over centuries, but remaining silent would mean compromising on historical values. In the world of royalty, sometimes the unspoken words possess the most devastating power. Jewelry can be recovered or replaced with perfect replicas, but ethical standards. Once a system has been compromised, it can never be restored to its original state. When national treasures are no longer kept in vaults, but become pawns in clandestine deals, are we witnessing the end of an era of trust? In your opinion, does the integrity of a monarchy lie in the glittering diamonds on its crown, or in the transparency of those who wear it? Is silence the best way to protect the monarchy, or will that very silence be a poison that gnaws away at the future? In the architecture of power, hesitation is sometimes more dangerous than a direct attack. CE. Prince William faces a difficult dilemma regarding system integrity. Should the dynasty protect its false image of unity or undergo a painful surgical procedure to salvage its core values? When trusted advisors are summoned in secret, a systemic analysis reveals that silence is no longer a shield, but complicity. The international media, with the keen instincts of the digital age, have begun to notice the implications. White space in Queen Camilla's schedule. The unexplained diplomatic flights and absences from traditional events created an uncontrollable wave of public opinion. Any hope of a mistake vanished when the final report from Zurich arrived. The emerald bracelet, a symbol of continuity dating back to the Empress Dowager's time, had been discovered in a private vault. This was no longer a hypothesis. This was a illegal asset supply chain. It was finalized. The coincidence of time, place, and approval signatures led William to an irreversible decision. He understood that to protect the crown of the future, he had to confront the harsh reality of the present. That morning, London was shrouded in a gray haze, signaling a constitutional change. William did not choose personal confrontation. He chose to restructuring of authority. The statement was drafted without directly making criminal accusations, which could have brought down the regime, but focused on redefining the responsibility for heritage preservation. By stripping people of their titles and public roles in the name of protecting national assets, William orchestrated a silent revolution. X. This was an unprecedented precedent, a direct successor eliminating flawed links in the power structure, even before officially ascending the throne. In the palace press room, the silence was so heavy that one could hear the clicking of waiting cameras. When William stepped onto the podium, he was not just a son, but a heritage protector. We are administering justice to prevent a major crisis of trust. The words spoken will not only change Camilla's position, but also alter the way the British monarchy operates in the 21st century. Peaceful courtesy has vanished, giving way to an era of strict scrutiny and unbridgeable boundaries. In the battle between kinship and national duty, what is the price of justice? Is removing a high-ranking figure to protect the crown jewels a courageous act to save the regime, or the beginning of a deeper rift we cannot foresee? If you were faced with that choice, would you protect your family's secrets or the heritage of a nation? Prince William's voice, echoing in the press conference room, was not just the voice of an heir, but of the echo of a system defending itself. He wasn't talking about lost gemstones. He was talking about contract of trust between the monarchy and the public. The decree was brief, but carried the weight of 1,000 years of history. Camilla has officially been stripped of her title as queen. B. Her public role ended, and her ceremonial duties were reassigned. This was not merely a personal punishment, but a transformation. Re-establish order. William affirmed a supreme principle. In a monarchy, no individual is allowed to stand above the integrity of the national heritage. In less than 5 minutes, the world witnessed a historical rift. While social media exploded like a digital earthquake with theories and astonishment inside the palace, the atmosphere was eerily silent. The corridors of Buckingham and Kensington are now shrouded in apprehension. Portraits are changed, seating charts are redrawn, a process that has been repeated. Erase system memory. It unfolded silently but fiercely. Camilla's discreet disappearance into the shadows of history is proof that when trust is broken, even the most powerful entities can vanish into the mists of oblivion. The incident plunged the British monarchy into an unprecedented territory. International analysts consider this the most decisive action of a future king, a powerful message to all generations. Power always comes with absolute responsibility. The palace security system is not only tightened by physical barriers, but also by a new transparent operating system. Every access log to the archives is digitized, and every movement of treasures must go through multiple layers of approval. The scandal, though a painful scar, has become a catalyst for the royal family to upgrade itself in the face of internal risks. D. Simon Harcourt returned to the shadows of the security consulting world, leaving behind a dossier whose full truth will likely never be revealed to the public, because some truths possess too destructive power to be made public. For William, this crisis was a harsh lesson about the price of leadership. Precious gems are not ornaments. They are the chapters of a nation. Protecting them is not about protecting them physically, but about protecting them. Sacred continuation of a nation. The monarchy has weathered the storm, but it is no longer what it once was. It has become more resilient, more disciplined, and more acutely aware of the true meaning of guarding history. As the curtain has closed and titles have been revoked, we are forced to ask ourselves, can an institution survive on the glitter of diamonds or on the ironclad boundaries of morality? In the battle between kinship and duty, was William's decision a necessary act of ruthlessness to save the future, or a crack that can never be mended in the heart of the dynasty? The answer perhaps lies not in what we see, but in what the royal family will choose to protect for centuries to come. The curtain has closed. The title is gone, but the real mysteries remain hidden in the shadows of the palace corridors. Was William's decision a salvation for the dynasty, or merely the opening shot in an irreparable rift? Which scenario do you believe, a purge for justice or a brutal power struggle? Leave your hypothesis below. I will respond directly to the most insightful comments. If you believe this is just the tip of the iceberg, click button link. Like this video. Don't let yourself be left out of the system's secrets. Click register, turn on notification bell right now. Here we don't just watch the news, we decipher the truth. The next chapter of power is being rewritten. Are you ready to join us? See you in the next investigation. F. Everyone always thought he would remain in the background, quietly standing by Princess Anne's side without a single complaint. For years, Sir Timothy Lawrence has been known as a symbol of devotion and discretion within the royal family. But now, a shocking revelation from the man himself, the loyal husband of Princess Anne, has stunned the royal circle. No one saw this coming. And you might be surprised too. Can you guess what's about to be revealed? If you can comment. 1. If not, comment 0 below. Don't forget to share your thoughts, hit follow, and join us as we uncover the untold secrets of the British royal family. For years, he quietly observed all the power struggles and behind-the-scenes rivalries unfolding behind the palace doors. But only recently, he broke his silence and revealed a dark secret about Queen Camilla, a truth that could completely change the public's perception of her. So what is that secret? Why did it take so many years to come to light? And how deeply will this revelation shake the royal family's already fragile relationships? This is a layered and complex story between two royal women. Imagine two women living within the same royal family, yet completely different in personality and behavior. This is the portrait of Princess Anne and Queen Camilla, two women who have never shared a close or warm relationship. Their connection isn't bound by affection, but by years of simmering tension, wary glances, and an unspoken rivalry that has never truly ended. The rift between them didn't begin suddenly. It has been smoldering for decades, tracing back to a tangled romance in the 1970s. At the time, Princess Anne was deeply involved in a romantic relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles, the man who would later become Camilla's husband. Although the two couldn't marry due to Andrew being Catholic, a faith that conflicted with royal protocol at the time, their relationship was believed to be genuinely heartfelt. In 1973, Andrew and Camilla reunited and got married. From that point on, Anne was visibly uncomfortable with Camilla's presence. The woman who had married the man Anne once deeply loved, frequently appearing at events in Buckingham Palace. But things didn't stop there. Nearly 3 decades later, Camilla went on to marry Prince Charles, Anne's younger brother. This overlapping relationship made it impossible for Anne to truly accept Camilla's presence within the royal family. According to those close to the palace, Camilla often felt pressured and overshadowed by Princess Anne's strong-willed and determined personality. For years, Camilla tried to keep her distance, even avoiding contact with her sister-in-law. However, tensions reached a boiling point during King Charles's coronation. At that time, Camilla expressed her desire to be called Queen rather than the traditional title of Queen Consort. This deeply angered Princess Anne. She firmly asserted that Camilla was not a queen in the true sense and should only be addressed by the correct title of Queen Consort. The conflict escalated, and although both always maintained a polite demeanor in public, anyone could sense the chilling tension between them that was impossible to hide. Many years after her relationship with Andrew ended, Princess Anne found happiness with Sir Timothy Lawrence, a former Royal Navy Vice Admiral known for his calm demeanor, discipline, and avoidance of the media spotlight. They married in 1992 in a simple yet dignified ceremony. It was Sir Timothy, quietly supporting his wife behind the scenes, who held one of the royal family's biggest secrets. Having served the nation for many years, and possessing a clear-eyed view of what happens behind the royal family's glamorous facade, he discovered something no one else dared to speak about. This secret not only shook the royal family's inner circle, but also had the potential to undermine the public image that people had long trusted about Queen Camilla. Since joining the royal family, Sir Timothy Lawrence's role as Princess Anne's husband has always been clear, quietly protecting and supporting his wife, serving the monarchy, and steering clear of any scandal or power struggles within the palace. He is a man of discipline, responsibility, and never lets emotions dictate his actions. However, by 2025, Timothy realized he could no longer stay out of the situation. What he witnessed within the royal family, especially from Queen Camilla, could no longer be ignored. At first, Timothy thought Princess Anne's criticisms of Camilla were simply due to his wife's naturally strong-willed and tough personality. But over time, he began to see that something was wrong. Camilla wasn't just someone who annoyed others. She seemed to act with calculated intent, carefully taking each step as if climbing a preordained ladder of power. When piecing together the events of the past, Timothy began to see how suspiciously everything fit into place. Camilla's affair with Prince Charles years ago not only shattered his marriage to Princess Diana, but also triggered a series of serious consequences, from the highly publicized divorce to Diana's heartbreaking tragedy. While the public may have varied perspectives for Princess Anne, who always places honor, duty, and family above all else, what Camilla did was unforgivable. According to Andrew Parker Bowles, Camilla's former husband, he confided in Timothy that Camilla had once neglected her own children to focus on inserting herself into the relationship between Charles and Diana. For Anne, this only reinforced her belief that Camilla was never truly fit to represent the core values of the royal family. But what's happening now is what truly worries Timothy. In recent years, as King Charles's health began to show signs of decline, Timothy has noticed a clear shift in Camilla's attitude and behavior. She no longer plays the role of the steady support she once claimed to be. In contrast, during royal meetings, internal events, and even family dinners, Camilla began speaking on Charles's behalf, offering opinions and steering discussions. For Timothy, who served in the military as a Royal Navy Vice Admiral, he clearly sensed a change in her demeanor. From a supportive wife, Camilla was positioning herself as a leader, as if preparing for the role of a true queen, going beyond the traditional boundaries of a queen consort. Especially Timothy noticed that Camilla began intervening in sensitive matters, like the Regency Act and succession plans. What's notable is that Camilla didn't just offer opinions, she issued directives and unsolicited advice, particularly to Prince William and Princess Kate. According to Timothy, these lessons sometimes crossed the line, making Kate feel pressured and fueling even more anger in Anne. What do you think about Camilla's interference? Do you feel her actions have gone too far? If yes, leave a 2 in the comments. If no, comment. 5. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to support the channel, giving me more motivation to bring you deeper insights in upcoming videos. However, what hurt Timothy and Princess Anne the most was how Camilla began managing King Charles's time. Under the pretext of protecting the king's health and peace of mind, Camilla increasingly limited his interactions with family, especially with Anne. On more than one occasion, Princess Anne returned home disappointed after last-minute cancellations of private meetings with her brother, moments she always cherished which Camilla skillfully blocked. For Anne, this wasn't just an inconvenience, it felt like a deliberate sidelining of family ties, eroding the trust between close relatives. Even the small family gatherings at Clarence House events that should have simply been moments to strengthen sibling bonds began to shrink. Strangely, Princess Anne was often left off the guest list. For someone who always puts family first, this was no small matter. What worried Sir Timothy Lawrence the most wasn't just the outward distance, but something deeper, a form of hidden power quietly spreading like a cold mist over the royal family. Timothy noticed how Camilla used words like a sweet yet corrosive weapon. She would gently say to King Charles, "Anne is just busy with horses and charities. She doesn't understand the real pressures of leadership like we do." In front of others, she appeared humble, but behind their backs, she skillfully sowed seeds of doubt. To the courtiers, Camilla expressed concerns that Prince William was too modern words that seemed harmless, but acted like a silent dagger cutting into the image of the heir to the throne. Timothy clearly understood the meaning behind these words. They were not simply personal remarks. This was a plan. A series of deliberately leaked statements designed to undermine the credibility of those around, so that Camilla could gradually establish herself as the only reliable pillar beside the king. The media campaign and the loaded silence. Then the media began to uniformly change their tone. Suddenly, headlines flooded the press like Camilla, the woman who holds the throne steady, the steady leadership of Queen Camilla. Meanwhile, there was almost no mention of Princess Anne's decades of service or the increasingly prominent roles of William and Kate in carrying the future of the royal family. For Timothy, everything was crystal clear. This was no coincidence. It was a systematically orchestrated campaign, a sophisticated strategy to place Camilla at the center, not only in the king's heart, but also in the eyes of the public. The atmosphere at the 2025 Royal Ascot Horse Racing Festival was as lively as ever, carriages, wide-brimmed hats, the cheers of the crowd. But behind the dazzling lights lay a cold truth. King Charles sat quietly, his face pale, breath weak exhaustion clearly etched on his features. And then, in a seemingly ordinary moment, Timothy stood near Camilla and accidentally overheard her whispering to her private advisor, "This throne must forever remain in my hands, no matter what happens to Charles." The words stunned Timothy into silence. A chill ran down his spine, colder than any storm he had ever faced at sea. For the first time, he no longer saw Camilla as just a difficult sister-in-law, but as a real threat to the throne and to the royal family itself. After that moment, Timothy began to take action. He searched for answers, and what he discovered shocked him. It was not just a careless remark. It was the culmination of a plan years in the making, a double-edged conspiracy to keep Charles alive, but not strong enough to stand in Camilla's way. Since King Charles began cancer treatment, his health has rapidly declined. The public believed it to be the natural consequence of the disease, but according to a shocking source Timothy accessed, Camilla had influenced the king's personal doctor to intentionally reduce the chemotherapy dosage. Not enough to cause Charles's death, but just enough to weaken him, gradually stripping him of his ability to govern the country, forcing him to rely entirely on his wife. The recorded words sent chills down people's spines. "Keep him alive for the cameras, but weak for me. If he slips up, I will destroy his career and his family. No longer the image of a devoted wife, this was a woman willing to go to any lengths to hold on to power. But it didn't stop there. Camilla was also rumored to have manipulated Charles while he was physically and mentally weak to force him to sign a secret power of attorney document. On the surface, these were just ordinary administrative papers. But in reality, this document transferred control of Princess Anne's charitable funds and inheritance, including those granted by Queen Elizabeth II and backed by the sovereign grant, directly into Camilla's hands. For Anne, it wasn't just about money. It was her career, her personal legacy, the medical, educational, and charitable projects she had painstakingly built over decades. And if Camilla succeeded, she would not only take the money, but also strip away the identity and role of a loyal, quiet, and dedicated royal princess. Princess Anne had firmly insisted that securing her financial safety was not only her right, but also the king's sacred duty. With a husband burdened by inner torment and fear, he had no choice but to yield. It was not just Sir Timothy's suspicions that exposed Camilla's dark secret, but the courage of a seemingly insignificant man, Edward Thompson, a low-level staff member at Clarence House. Edward had quietly witnessed countless whispers, threats, and shadowy schemes surrounding Camilla's private affairs for years. During that time, he chose silence out of fear of severe consequences. But when he heard Camilla threaten the king's personal doctor with words sharp as a blade, he knew he could no longer stay quiet. With trembling courage, Edward secretly recorded the conversation on his phone, hiding it in his coat pocket as his heart pounded with every beat. That small act of bravery transformed Edward from a silent observer into the keeper of the key to the survival of the entire monarchy. When Sir Timothy received the recording, he felt a cold punch to his heart, later confessing to close friends, "This is no longer rumor or suspicion, but undeniable proof that Camilla's ambition has crossed the line, possibly even into criminal behavior." For Sir Timothy, discovering this truth was a heavy burden, but also an unshakable mission. He understood that holding this truth meant possessing the power to either break or save the kingdom. The issue was no longer just about King Charles's health or Princess Anne's finances, but the very soul and honor of an entire realm that millions around the world still revered. Despite the weight of guilt and responsibility pressing on his shoulders, Sir Timothy knew this was only the beginning. If Camilla was bold enough to manipulate the doctors and coerce the king himself, no one knew what else she might be capable of. Unable to delay any longer, he resolved to reveal the whole truth to the king. For Sir Timothy, uncovering this truth was a heavy burden, but also an unavoidable mission. He understood that holding this secret meant possessing the power to either break or save the dynasty. The issue was no longer just King Charles's health or Princess Anne's finances. It was the very soul and honor of a monarchy revered by millions worldwide. Despite the weight of guilt and responsibility on his shoulders, Sir Timothy knew this was only the beginning. If Camilla was bold enough to manipulate doctors and coerce the king himself, no one could predict what else she might do. Without hesitation, he decided to reveal the whole truth to the king. When the truth reached King Charles, it wasn't a single blow, but a series of violent waves crashing over his frail body. His heart shattered not only from the betrayal, but also from his own blindness. For more than 3 decades, Charles had steadfastly defended and proven his love for Camilla before family church and the public. He had defied public opposition to keep her close, insisting that their love was genuine and unshakable. Memories flooded Charles's mind, images of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who had always shown clear caution whenever Camilla's name was mentioned. From the wedding day, when the Queen avoided taking photos with the newlyweds, she had only ever accepted Camilla reluctantly. At the time, Charles thought it was just the conservative view of an old generation, but now that judgment felt like a forewarning. Perhaps the Queen had seen it all along, that Camilla was not truly his partner, but a schemer. Charles recalled the long days lying in his hospital bed, exhausted from chemotherapy. He remembered the times Camilla sat beside him holding his hand, whispering words of comfort. But how many of those were lies? How many of those gentle touches were just a performance to hide ambition? This realization dug deep into his heart, turning him from a man standing strong into an empty shell. Not only was his body weakening, but his soul was fracturing as he recognized that the partner he had trusted for so many years was actually the mastermind behind a dark conspiracy. Yet what troubled him most wasn't the personal pain, but the fear of the royal family's reaction, his children, his sister, and his advisors. They had sacrificed so much for him, always standing by his side. Now, because of his choice, they had to endure the shame of scandal. For a man who had spent his entire life preparing to become king, the crown felt heavier than ever before. And for the first time in his reign, Charles wondered if he still had the strength and authority to continue wearing that crown. The heir's reaction. Prince William. When the video recording of Camilla's threats was played in front of Prince William, his reaction was immediate and intense, usually a model of calm composure that calm shattered completely. His face turned pale, then flushed red with uncontrollable anger. For William, this was not just an ordinary scandal, but a slow assassination, a ruthless plot to poison his father through cruel schemes to seize power. That anger transformed into unshakable determination. Rising above the initial shock, William quickly stepped up to take control of the situation with the assuredness of a natural-born leader. He made it clear that this was no longer a private family matter, but had become a legal crisis that demanded swift and decisive action. While William reacted fiercely, Princess Anne, known for her strong will and unshakable calm, broke down. Her tears were not from weakness, but from the burning pain and deep sorrow of a sister witnessing her beloved brother being cruelly manipulated and harmed. Princess Anne painfully recalled their late mother's final admonitions about her financial independence. Queen Elizabeth II had always been meticulous in ensuring that the charitable funds and assets meant for her daughter were securely protected from any risk of exploitation. Now seeing Camilla attempting to seize those sacred legacies, Anne felt she could no longer bear it. Standing firmly beside Prince William, Anne became a voice that no lawyer or advisor could replace. With a tone full of righteous anger, she clearly outlined the historical weight and profound emotional significance of their mother's will, while exposing the illegality and murky financial schemes orchestrated by Camilla. In the meeting room, the royal council, comprising senior advisors, top lawyers, and a few trusted friends of Queen Elizabeth, listened quietly. 3 tense hours passed as they debated vigorously over the legal and political consequences of the evidence. Could the truth be made public? Would exposing Camilla shatter the already fragile image of the monarchy in the modern world? Yet no doubt remained. Even the most cautious advisors admitted that if Camilla's conspiracy continued, it would not only destroy King Charles but also threaten to overturn the entire crown. One by one, hesitant voices gradually fell silent. And when the session ended, everyone reached a consensus. Camilla would be stripped of all executive powers and financial control. All charitable funds and assets that she tried to seize would be returned to Princess Anne and placed under the joint supervision of Anne and William. From now on, Camilla's role would be nothing more than an empty shell. She would only be the queen consort in name, without any real power. The council also made one final, equally important decision. This scandal must never be allowed to leak to the public. The secret that the queen consort had conspired against the king had to be kept under wraps because if it got out, people would start doubting the king's health and capability. Everything had been arranged smoothly, except Camilla had no idea how her life was about to change. When the news that her secret had been exposed reached Camilla, people expected her to be scared, remorseful, or at least pretend to be. But no. The walls of Clarence's house shook with her furious screams. Camilla paced the room like a cornered beast, hands trembling, face twisted with rage. She had spent her entire life climbing to the pinnacle of the monarchy, standing at the center of power. The thought that it could all be swept away in a single moment was unbearable to her. In a panic, Camilla made a reckless decision, revealing the depth of her fear. She summoned a close aide and coldly ordered eliminate Sir Timothy Lawrence. She blamed him entirely, accusing him of being overly curious, digging and exposing the secrets she had deliberately kept hidden. The assassination plot fails and tensions escalate. However, the assassination plot never succeeded. The plot was discovered and stopped before Sir Timothy's life was ever threatened. This event only reinforced the council's belief that Camilla was dangerous and mentally unstable. The news of the failure quickly reached her ears, causing Camilla's state of mind to spiral further into chaos. The palace, once the stage for her sophisticated manipulations, had now become a suffocating prison where every glance felt like a threat. She paced endlessly through the corridors, her mind tangled with impossible scenarios. She thought of ways to regain her position of power and silence her enemies. But every idea collapsed into the same conclusion: she had failed. But Camilla had no idea that the cruelest fate was yet to come. A simple letter sealed with the Royal Council's emblem was delivered to her. That seal signaled a serious message. With trembling hands, Camilla tore open the envelope and began to read. The merciless words, written in the cold language of law and order, clearly stated her executive powers were completely revoked. Her influence and authority would be stripped away. She would retain only the ceremonial title of Queen Consort with no rights or power beyond a mere formality. Her eyes gradually dimmed, her face turning pale as she read each line. Those who witnessed it later recalled seeing her sit silently clutching the paper until it was torn and tattered. She had fought her entire life to be recognized as Charles's official partner to reach the position she believed was her destined right. Now all of that had vanished. The letter slipped from her hands onto the floor. For a long while she just sat there staring blankly into space. Then unusual tears began to fall. She wept not for Charles, nor for the family that had been shattered, but for herself and the dream that had died. But now everything had slipped away. The letter fell from her hands onto the floor. For a long time, she just sat there staring into space. Then unusual tears began to fall. She cried not for Charles or the family that had been torn apart, but for herself and the dream that had died. That night, standing before the mirror, the woman who looked back was no longer a powerful queen, but a 78-year-old woman with empty eyes and a wrinkled face. Camilla's resilience had completely collapsed. She shut the door to her room and refused to see anyone. The palace, once her throne, had become a prison. Her dream of power didn't just slip away, it turned to ashes. She wasn't exiled to a distant land, nor publicly humiliated. The harshest punishment she faced was to live the rest of her life in emptiness and under the disdain of her own family. Although her actions deserved imprisonment, this punishment was even more severe. Camilla had to live in solitude, consumed by anger and contempt. Her story ended in complete failure, her malicious ambitions shattered, leaving only an old woman staring into the mirror, wondering had she ever truly won anything. What do you think about the Royal Council's decision? Was that punishment fair for what Camilla did? If not, what would you consider a more just penalty? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more compelling stories. And remember to click on the next video on your screen. You're going to love it. This is purely for reference purposes, only based on hypotheses and unverified rumors, public speculation. Let's discuss it from an objective analytical perspective. If you looked at the viral images of those 7 mysterious suitcases sitting on the tarmac at LAX and assumed that was the absolute climax of this saga, you have likely missed the bigger picture. And if you believed the dramatic narrative ended when that private jet made an emergency diversion to a high-security military base in Sicily, you are mistaken again. In reality, those explosive events were merely the prologue, a chaotic setup for a much more intense and calculated chapter that is only now beginning to unfold. We are moving beyond the spectacle and entering the most critical phase of this entire investigation, the revelation of cold, hard, and irrefutable evidence. And the man who played the decisive role in this turnaround was the Sussex's old rival, Piers Morgan, a controversial figure whose image is associated with constant warnings to the public. He has been criticized as bitter, even scheming, but today what he is bringing is completely different. Immediately after news broke about Meghan Markle's arrest in Italy with undeclared $12 million in cash, Piers Morgan wasted no time in coming forward. This appearance was a marked departure from his usual style. He wasn't there merely to offer personal anecdotes or subjective commentary. Instead, he arrived armed with a substantial, meticulously organized dossier that seemed to physically validate the fragmented truths that had been slowly percolating across social media platforms. With a gravity that silenced the room, Piers Morgan made a declaration that resonated with finality. "I've seen her bank records. She's ruined." The tension within the studio became so palpable that the air felt heavy, and not a single colleague dared to interject. At that moment, the noise of celebrity gossip faded away, replaced entirely by the cold authority of documents and financial figures, shocking revelations that he asserted were sourced directly from an active forensic audit currently being executed by Prince Harry's own legal counsel. The sheer magnitude of this truth was something that caught even seasoned observers completely off guard. It increasingly appeared that Prince Harry's legal team was executing a sophisticated tactical maneuver utilizing Piers Morgan as an unofficial conduit to leak privileged information before any Hollywood PR spin doctors had a chance to intervene or sanitize the narrative. The broadcast itself began in a manner that was deeply unsettling. There was no opening music, no frenetic energy, just a heavy, suffocating silence that spoke volumes. Piers sat motionless, his eyes locked onto the camera lens with a look of absolute conviction, devoid of his usual theatricality. When he finally broke the tension, his words were not a question, but a somber vindication. "I warned you all from the very beginning that this was a hoax. I warned you that those tears were nothing more than a performance." He pressed on, his voice dropping, as he addressed the audience with a mix of vindication and genuine disbelief. "Even with my notorious skepticism, I never could have fathomed that she would be implicated in something of this magnitude, a sophisticated $12 million money laundering operation routed through a shadowy shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. But we are past the point of speculation. These are undeniable metrics, and they are right here before our eyes. With a deliberate motion, Piers flipped open the dossier to a specific page, prompting the studio cameras to zoom in until the text filled the screens at home. While the sensitive account numbers were heavily redacted with thick black ink to comply with legal standards, the entity listed at the top was starkly legible: Arch Illumination Limited. It was revealed to be a liquidation account held at Silicon Valley Bank, explicitly flagging an urgent wire transfer with a final destination of Dubai. These leaked files appear to serve as the final corroborating puzzle piece, validating the fragmented details that have surfaced in previous independent investigations. What we are witnessing here is not random spending, but a documented pattern of systematic withdrawals hemorrhaging from the Sussexes' joint accounts, a timeline that stretches back exactly 18 months. Piers drew the audience's attention to a critical timestamp buried in the ledger, his finger tapping the screen for emphasis. "Focus on this date," he commanded. "This isn't a coincidence. This marks the exact day the Spotify partnership was publicly terminated." The implication was devastatingly clear the very moment their primary revenue stream evaporated. She allegedly initiated a series of unauthorized transfers. This behavior cannot be dismissed as a momentary lapse or financial panic. Rather, it bears all the hallmarks of a cold, calculated diversion of assets designed to secure capital before the ship went down. What infused Piers's reaction with such visceral impact was not just shock but the chilling clarity of recognition. He knew exactly who he was looking at in that grainy LAX airport footage. He recounted a specific encounter with this woman at an exclusive media finance conference in London years prior, where she wasn't discussing public relations but was evangelizing aggressive high-stakes tax avoidance strategies tailored for the ultra-elite. "I knew the nature of her character from that very moment," he stated with grim certainty. "She was a shark in a tailored suit." Seeing this specific figure standing shoulder to shoulder with Meghan on the tarmac signaled that the situation had escalated beyond simple celebrity management. The conclusion was inescapable: the game was over. Meghan hadn't hired a business manager to handle her career. She had retained a professional cleaner to sanitize the trail. Piers then proceeded to drop perhaps the most explosive bombshell of the night, revealing a specific detail that has never before entered the public domain. He exposed a wire transfer totaling exactly $2 million drained from Prince Harry's private trust, the sacred inheritance left to him by the late Queen Mother. Crucially, these funds were not moved to a joint holding, but were funneled directly into an account over which Meghan exercised absolute unilateral control. The timing of this transaction is chilling. It was executed exactly 3 days before the chaotic incident unfolded at LAX airport. This timeline forces us to ask the question that is now echoing across the internet: is this merely a bizarre coincidence, or are we witnessing the final steps of a meticulously planned exit strategy? We want to hear your perspective on this theory. Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you remain on the front line of this developing story as we continue to uncover the truth. The tremble in Piers' voice was unmistakable, vibrating with a level of visceral rage that seemed to shake the very desk he sat behind. As he pored over the damning documents spread out before him, his demeanor shifted from professional analysis to pure moral outrage. She didn't just drain a bank account. She took the entire inheritance that Harry's grandmother specifically bequeathed to secure his future. He seethed. "Let's call this what it really is. That is not business, that is grave robbing." His words sliced through the stifling tension of the studio like a razor, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. He proceeded to dissect the financial statement we had uncovered line by line, his tone completely stripped of his usual wit or humor. "She genuinely thinks the FBI are fools, doesn't she?" he asked rhetorically, locking eyes with the camera. "She seems to believe that just because she acted out a role on a TV show, she possesses the capability to outsmart seasoned federal agents. But it is exactly that profound arrogance, that blinding delusion of invincibility, that is guaranteed to be her ultimate downfall." Piers Morgan continued his forensic deconstruction of the event, distinguishing clearly between a simple procedural error and a serious violation of federal law. Let's be clear about the legal reality here. Had she simply declared the currency upon entry, she likely would have faced nothing more than a standard administrative fine or a civil penalty. However, by willfully falsifying a federal customs declaration form, she has irrevocably escalated this situation from a minor infraction into a full-blown criminal felony. Piers then shifted his focus to the sociological fallout, analyzing the unprecedented reaction, or rather the lack thereof, from the Sussex fan community. In any normal news cycle, his social media feeds would be inundated with vitriol-coordinated attacks and accusations of lying. Yet this time, the digital landscape was eerily, surprisingly silent. "Why is there such radio silence?" he asked, leaning in. The answer is simple. You can debate a subjective opinion until you are blue in the face, but you cannot debate hard-cold paper evidence. With a gesture of supreme confidence, Piers tapped the stack of financial records on his desk, visually demonstrating that he had effectively neutralized Meghan's online army, not with rhetoric, but with unassailable facts. Piers paused, looking directly into the lens as he addressed the invisible audience of his former detractors. "Where is the outraged chorus now? Where are the vocal critics who branded me a monster simply for daring to ask the uncomfortable questions?" he challenged. Was it truly an act of cruelty to inquire why a duchess would be transporting suitcases filled with liquid cash onto a high-security military base in Sicily, or was I simply performing the fundamental, often gritty duty of an investigative journalist? Then the broadcast took a turn that no one saw coming, a sudden palpable shift in emotional temperature. For the first time in years, Piers Morgan dropped his guard to express a rare, genuine sympathy for Prince Harry. He reframed the narrative entirely, painting Harry not as a willing accomplice, but as a man who had been psychologically hollowed out, manipulated, and robbed blind. "Let's be honest about the reality here," Piers asserted with a somber gravity. "Harry is a man who made a catastrophic error in judgment, yes, but looking at these files, he is no longer just a participant. He is the primary victim of a sophisticated crime." He went further, constructing a powerful argument that Prince Harry requires immediate physical and psychological separation from the Duchess. In Piers's evolving thesis, the dynamic is no longer being framed as a partnership, but rather as a clear case of predator versus prey, where Harry is the unwitting victim in need of extraction. But Piers didn't stop at psychological profiling. In a move that kept viewers glued to their screens, he teased the existence of a smoking gun document, a piece of evidence so volatile that strict legal constraints currently prevent its full publication. However, he made a solemn promise to unveil it in the next installment of this investigation. He described the item in chilling detail, a digital correspondence originating from Meghan's private encrypted server and directed to a high-level contact in Dubai. The timestamp is critical, dated exactly 1 week prior to that fateful flight. The subject line consisted of 2 simple yet ominous words: "Package ready." Piers posited that this email serves as definitive proof of long-term premeditation. It suggests that while she was publicly smiling for the cameras alongside Harry at the Invictus Games, projecting the image of a supportive spouse, she was simultaneously operating in the shadows, sending critical logistical coordinates to her accomplices. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment escape. It was a master plan months in the making. She is finished." Piers reiterated with absolute conviction, punctuating his verdict by slamming the thick dossier shut on the desk with a resounding thud. This isn't just the end of her tenure as a working member of the royal family, nor is it merely the collapse of her celebrity brand. By crossing these legal lines, she has effectively signed away her own freedom. He painted a stark picture of the future, stripping away the glamour that usually surrounds the Duchess. Mark my words, the next time the world catches a glimpse of Meghan Markle, she won't be draped in haute couture or wearing a custom Dior gown on a red carpet. She will be standing before a federal judge in a court of law. And rest assured, I will be there seated front and center documenting every single second of accountability. Piers made it clear that his intense reaction was a necessary step in validating a scandal many had dismissed. By staking his reputation on these documents, Piers Morgan has dramatically amplified the scope of this investigation, commanding the attention of the global press. The impact was instantaneous. Across the Atlantic, editors at major British tabloids were reportedly stopping the presses, scrambling to revise their front pages to feature his defining declaration in bold, unforgiving headlines, "I have seen the files." He took a moment to emphasize the sheer scale of the forensic undertaking involved, describing the recovery of deleted tweets, scrubbed statements, and digital cover-ups, not just as research, but as a digital archaeological dig. He stressed that piecing together these fragments of truth from a deliberate campaign of obfuscation is a time-consuming and laborious task that requires significant resources. Piers then pivoted directly to the audience, issuing an urgent call to action. He encouraged viewers to support the channel's mission by becoming official members, framing this financial support not merely as a donation, but as the fuel necessary to help this story bypass the mainstream media gatekeepers and spread to a wider global audience. Moving seamlessly into the second half of the broadcast, Piers introduced a segment he provocatively titled "The Bag Flipping Game." He strode confidently across the studio to a massive electronic smartboard which flickered to life to reveal a complex visual diagram of the alleged theft. He traced the path with his finger, demonstrating that this wasn't a simple linear transfer from the Archewell Foundation directly to Meghan's personal luggage. Instead, the graphic displayed a labyrinthine spiderweb of transactions, an intricate network designed to confuse auditors and hide the true origin of the funds. At the heart of all the transactions was a Delaware-registered company called Project Phoenix LLC, which Piers claimed served as the funnel for receiving the money. Every payment from Netflix, Spotify, or Penguin Random House goes into a shared account, and within 48 hours a corresponding amount is transferred to Project Phoenix to pay for consulting services. Harry signed off on these payments. Piers pointed to the screen, drawing the audience's attention. "Look at that signature," he continued. "That's Harry's signature, but the dates don't match." This shows that these signatures were not real. They were just digital copies. Meghan didn't need Harry's approval for every transaction. She already had his electronic signature on file and automatically approved the funds. Harry was deceived, approving millions of dollars while busy playing polo or writing books. All through a single PDF file, and the truth revealed changed Harry's role from an accomplice to a victim of identity fraud. The unauthorized use of his electronic signature for each transaction constitutes the crime of signature forgery. Piers didn't stop there. He went on to highlight a crucial transaction, a $2 million withdrawal fee taken from the Queen Mother's Trust, the last remaining funds tied to Harry's family history. The receiving account, a Dubai bank called JRA Sovereign Holdings, confirmed the severity of the theft. Colleagues on set were furious, whispering to each other, "She took the Queen Mother's money." The money that was supposed to protect Harry was instead used to aid Meghan's escape. This wasn't just greed, but an act of revenge, a challenge to the organization that bestowed upon her the title she now hides behind Piers Morgan. After dealing with the legal threat, Piers moved on to the previously leaked emails. While unable to provide actual screenshots due to legal requirements, he did read verifiable excerpts. An email sent to an architect listed the assets to be liquidated, and not just cash. Piers read each item aloud. First, Diana's watch. Second, the Cartier bracelet. Third, the diamond engagement ring. He paused, his expression serious. Meghan wasn't just taking cash. She also planned to sell jewelry associated with Princess Diana gifts from Harry items symbolizing their love. Piers emphasized that the items were estimated to be worth up to $450,000, and they needed to be sold urgently. He asserted that selling Diana's jewelry on the black market in Dubai was a profound insult not only to the royal family, but also to the British people. Harry, who had always been proud of his mother, would see this as a grave betrayal, viewing her family's heirlooms as easily liquidated commodities. It would be an unimaginable psychological shock. Royal biographer Tom Bower, who was expected to appear on the show later, was overheard in the waiting room, sadly acknowledging the scale of the theft. Piers concluded with a strong plea to the Italian authorities: don't let her go. Confiscate her luggage and search her carry-on. If that Cartier watch is in there, she's smuggling stolen royal property. When the show returned after the commercial break, the atmosphere shifted from investigative outrage to justifiable vindication. Piers addressed the Hollywood elite directly. For years you have lectured us, awarded her prizes, and honored her as an icon fighting against systemic racism. So where are you all today? Piers named the powerful representatives at WME who signed contracts with Meghan, despite knowing full well that her financial books had been manipulated. He criticized her celebrity friends who lent her private jets acting as carriers of illegal cargo. You're not supporting a humanitarian, Piers continued. You're covering up the reputation of a fraud. By protecting her and silencing her critics, you're complicit. You created the shield so she could embezzle $12 million. This is the Piers Morgan effect. Reclaim the awards. Admit if you've been cheated. Otherwise, I'll assume you already know. The next segment of the program revealed a shocking piece of information after the commercial break. A senior member of the British royal family contacted Piers not for an interview, but simply to say 2 words: thank you. This person felt unable to speak the truth, unable to defend themselves. But today they sensed that justice was finally being served. The king was watching. That thank you officially confirmed everything and showed Piers was acting as a secret communication channel for the monarchy. Piers also didn't forget to move on to political issues, particularly the interference of the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. How can a woman transfer $12 million through American banks without IRS interference? Piers questioned. If I transferred $10,000, they would audit me for a whole year. The story becomes increasingly complicated, and the questions grow heavier. Will justice truly be served? Or is it all just an elaborate charade? We'll have to wait and see what further revelations come, but this story certainly won't end so easily. She has transferred millions of dollars, and now Piers Morgan is relentlessly raising thorny questions about political protection. He raises rumors that Meghan Markle is being groomed for a Senate seat and is building a network of connections with top Democratic fundraisers. Is she being protected? Is there a no-holds-barred approach to Sussex's records because Meghan is considered a valuable political asset? If so, this is not just a celebrity scandal, but potentially corruption at the highest levels of the U.S. government. Piers called for a congressional hearing demanding the release of suspicious reports from the banks. I want to see that report. I want to know which bank manager discovered it and who covered it up. There can't be 7 suitcases of cash on the runway and no one in power turned a blind eye, Piers said. He invited Dr. Orwell, a forensic psychologist, to join via satellite. Piers asked, "Is she insane or evil?" Dr. Orwell replied coldly, "She's not insane, Piers." Based on the analysis of the power structure and the transformation of the characters involved in this investigation, what are your thoughts? If you find Piers Morgan and the experts' arguments to be valid, please leave a comment. Number 2 in the comments section. If you believe this is just a misunderstanding or a staged scenario to tarnish reputation, please leave a comment. Number 5, don't forget to press like and subscribe to the channel. Join us now as we continue to unravel the hidden corners and complex systems in our upcoming videos. Your support is our motivation to seek the truth. She is a highly extreme, antisocial personality disorder. The plans, the architect, the fake costumes, it's all cold, calculated, rational work. Piers relentlessly criticized she feels no guilt. She's just afraid of being caught. Right now she's sitting in a jail cell in Sicily. She doesn't regret stealing the money. She regrets that the pilot diverted the plane. At the end of the program, Piers held up the last photograph of Prince Harry taken the day before. Harry looked haggard, pale, and lonely. Piers said softly, "Look at him. This is what happens when you let a vampire into your house." She drained his bank account, his joy, his family, and his reputation. Now he's just an empty shell. The man who fought in Afghanistan has been defeated by a Hallmark actress. Looking directly into the camera, Piers continued, "Harry, if you're watching, pick up the phone. Call your father not to ask for money but to apologize, because the only people who will visit you in the hospice are the family you betrayed." Piers went on to announce that the U.S. ambassador to Italy had arrived at the base in Sicily. Don't let them make a deal. Keep an eye on the State Department, Piers warned viewers. If they try to sneak her back to a private clinic in Malibu for burnout treatment, we'll riot. She should be in jail, not at a spa. At the end of the program, Piers welcomed an unexpected guest, a former U.S. federal prosecutor specializing in international organized crime and large-scale asset seizures. This wasn't a famous lawyer seeking attention. "This is the man who sent drug cartels to jail," Piers introduced. The colleagues asked the question everyone wanted answered. Considering the charges of fraud, cyber fraud, money laundering, and misappropriation of trust funds, how long will she face in prison? The prosecutor remained calm and replied, "Ladies and gentlemen, if the evidence you present is credible, then this is not a light punishment. We are facing a serious case under the Criminal Influential and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. Meghan Markle, through a network of shell companies and offshore banks, orchestrated a complex scheme that carries a mandatory minimum sentence. Combined with charges of cyber fraud, customs violations, and illegal transaction structures, she faces a sentence of 20 to 30 years in prison without parole." Piers Morgan questioned her ability to avoid severe punishment, especially given her status as a duchess and mother of a prince's children. But the prosecutor shook his head. Not this time. The king had stripped her of her title, and the State Department was also suffering embarrassment as the incident humiliated the U.S. government at a NATO military base. "This will be a lesson for all. No house arrest, no yoga retreats, no luxurious life in Monaco. Instead, Meghan will face years in a federal prison, perhaps FCI Dublin or Alderson, where men in khaki uniforms work for 12 cents an hour. From Duchess, she has become a prisoner, a harsh and inevitable transition. The illusions of exile in Dubai have vanished, and now she must face the reality of a 6x8-meter cell. Arteriovenous malformation (AVM) is an extremely dangerous condition in which the blood vessels in the face connect abnormally, forming a tangled network that can rupture at any moment. Jennifer's face was covered with bright red vascular masses, swollen like balloons on the verge of bursting. Every breath and every smile was a gamble with death for Jennifer. To save her life, doctors had to place tissue expanders beneath her facial skin, making her appearance during treatment even more frightening. You wouldn't believe the dramatic transformation she underwent after. As the cameras faded, the message became crystal clear. Stories can be staged, images can be curated, and sympathy can be manufactured, but the numbers do not lie. When the truth finally hits, no title, no fame, and no carefully crafted legend can protect her anymore. Please note, this content is for reference only based on unverified theories and public speculation. We are discussing this through an objective analytical lens. Now I want to hear from you. Press 1 if you believe this theory has merit. Press 0 if you think this is nothing more than baseless rumor. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep uncovering the latest developments behind the veil of secrecy. Is a soft coup unfolding behind the velvet curtains of Buckingham Palace? Insider whispers speak of a quiet alliance between Princess Anne and Princess Kate aimed at repositioning or, more bluntly, isolating Queen Camilla. The royal legacy does not tolerate dilution. And when the gatekeepers begin to move, this is not petty rivalry, but a self-defense mechanism of an entire institution. So what is really happening? Let's decode it together. It was once an abstract concept, but at Buckingham right now it carries immense weight, heavy enough to crush individual egos and reshape an entire reign. Why is a system built on continuity suddenly showing such deep fractures? Are we witnessing a transition or a form of natural elimination? This analysis is based on public sentiment, body language, and theories circulating within the royal watching community and has not been officially confirmed. We are discussing this objectively. The memory file of the late Diana is being reopened. The coldness of Anne or Kate is not a momentary emotion, it is a defensive reaction of a system that eliminates what it deems illegitimate. It may be the system's self-protective response to what it considers incompatible with the standards of the throne. But on this chessboard of the century, who is the one commanding the game and who is merely a pawn to decode the present? We are compelled to look into the mirror of the past. But is Kate truly acting alone? In a world governed by rules, no move made by the Princess of Wales is without the consent of the man at the top of the line of succession, Prince William. Sources leaking from Kensington Palace suggest that William maintains a polite but cold distance from his stepmother. To William, Camilla remains a permanent reminder of the years of suffering endured by his mother Diana. If Kate is the one carrying out the rituals of isolation on the public stage, then William is the one approving that strategy behind closed doors. Imagine a chessboard where the King Charles is trying to protect the Queen Camilla, while the Rook and the Bishop William and Kate are quietly closing in to prepare for a new reign, a reign they want to be completely cleansed of past controversies. This is not merely a family conflict, it is the preparation for the cleanest possible transfer of power. The palace has never been a place of just tea parties and roses. It is a grand stage of perfectly managed appearances, where the undercurrents of power collide with brutal force. The history of Buckingham Palace is no stranger to purges of power from the days of Henry VIII to the present. But why, in the 21st century, does the question of Camilla's legitimacy still provoke figures like Princess Anne to such determination? The answer lies not in the past, but in the future of the crown. Never underestimate the power of the men in gray, the private secretaries and senior advisors who keep the royal machine running. Why would they allow these rumors to spread? Never underestimate the power of the men in gray, the private secretaries and senior advisors who operate the royal machine. So why let the rumors circulate? The objective is clear: to protect the symbolic authority of the crown. If the public begins to view the royal family as a long-running soap opera, its dignity erodes. Therefore, repositioning Camilla into a more subdued role becomes a way to excise a troublesome tumor and